The message of Islam, and this is a perfect opportunity actually. What is the message of Islam? It is a message of there's only one creator worthy of worship. Hi Bavlo, how are you doing? See, someone like this, I don't mind talking to. Why? Because there's reciprocation. There's mutual respect. But someone like that, we will not speak to. Someone who lies and slanders. Ultimately, we as Muslims, we believe that there's one creator worthy of worship. Bavlo, come a bit more forward, I want to have a conversation with you. This is somebody worth having a conversation with. All right. How are you doing? All right?
How's it going?
I like your shirt.
Thank you. It was a friend of mine called Christian who made it. If you want him to make a shirt to you, speak to him.
So I don't mind. Can you get slightly back? Because I'm going to be projecting my voice. So I don't mind having discussions with people that are civil, people that are rational, people that have mutual respect, like Bavlo. So Bavlo, let's have a discussion. You believe in agnosticism?
Yes, you could say it that way.
Okay. I'm a Muslim. So let's have a discussion which worldview makes more sense.
Okay.
Agnosticism or Islam. So I'm going to give it over to you. Why do you think agnosticism makes more sense than Islam?
I think agnosticism is likelier than Islam because likelier. Agnosticism is likelier to be the answer to the questions that I have in my life, because Islam is just like any other religion. It claims to have all the truth on the grasp of a hand. You can look at the Quran and you can find out all the truth. I don't believe that finding the truth is as simple as that. I think the best choice for people to take, the best choice for a society to take, changes from environment to environment. I don't think just one book can be the answer to all the different possibilities, to all the different problems that could be offered to a society. So I don't think one book can answer everything, basically.
Okay. So a quick thing that you said is firstly that Islam is something which claims to have the answers to everything. Now, Islam gives you the answers to existentialism, which is why we exist, okay? It's not there to give you an answer to what is the best model to understand quantum mechanics, right? It's not there to tell you, is many worlds better than Copernican or whatever, right? So Islam is there to answer those basic questions. Now, in regards to, you said we have to adapt to our environment, right? But isn't it the case that we create the environment? We create culture, and culture feeds back to us in a positive feedback loop. But ultimately, your values and collectively our values create the culture. So, environment, if we were to get our guidance from environment rather than from the creator, then our environment would tell us a different set of morals for one century and a different set of morals for another century, and there'd be no way of adjudicating between centuries.
That's exactly how it is. There's different morals in different timelines. In one timeline and in one place. In one time, in one place, something can be accepted as acceptable by society. And in another timeline, it will be seen as abhorrent. You know what I mean? Different cultures, there's some warrior cultures in which dying in combat is the main thing, the main important thing. So they're warlike, they're definitely not peaceful. But they have things like, for example, honor, blah, 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 all of those things that are seen as positive. And yet they have things that are seen as negative too, It all depends on the environment, because it's mutual. It's as you said, because we also shape the environment. I mean, look around us. The environment has been reshaped by humans, but humans also are influenced by the environment. And that's what creates culture. It's the relation between humans and the environment. I think that's what creates religion, I think.
Okay, so if what you're saying is true, there's no way of adjudicating between one set of morals and another set of morals, because it's just contingent on whatever is the flavor of the day. So as an example, if we go back to, you said you were from which country again? Ukraine. So let's go back to Ukraine, say 50 years ago. Would you say there would be a big problem with people being anti-Semitic? Right?
50 years ago.
50 years ago. And would you also say people back then had a well, not 50s, let's say 70 years ago, during the height of the Soviet Union, that they had morals which you would today find very problematic. I think it's safe to say that, right? And their ideas on human rights collectively would be very different to the sort of ideas that you have today. Now, if you have your ideas and Ukrainians have their ideas, then from your perspective, how can you tell this one's true and this one's false? How can you adjudicate between the two? And the revelation from God, if something comes from God and God knows everything, then that thing is going to be objectively true. But in your case, it's just going to change according to the flavors, the trends, and the passions and the desires of the populace at a particular time.
Yeah. I tell you what, I see for myself at least a way of judging which cultures and which ideas are better than others. It's a relation between cost and reward. You know,
Let me get off. Yeah, carry on.
Everything that you do, everything you, all the moves that you make in the society have a cost and a reward. You know, for example, conquest. You expand your empire, you conquer other peoples. There's a cost. There's going to be suffering. There's going to be deaths. There's going to be, abhorrent things happening. But if the reward of that society is to create a great civilization that will eventually make the lives of the people better, that will make humanity move forward, then the reward outweighs the cost in this way. Now, for example, if we look at a specific culture, you know, Carthage. Carthage had a religious practice of child prostitution and child sacrifice. It was not a positive cost-reward relation, because sacrificing children is such a big cost to take, such a great and abhorrent action to make, that the reward to outweigh that is simply unachievable to humans, I would say. So we can tell, we can judge things with cost and reward. We can see what it took to achieve that. We can see the achievement and we can make the judgment.
Okay, so that perspective, that's a utilitarian way of looking at things. So what you're doing is you're looking at the maximum happiness and the minimum amount of suffering, right? The maximum benefits and the minimum amount of pain. Now the problem with that perspective is we can see scenarios in which if we change the variables, we'll have totally different moral outcomes. So for example, if you have someone recently, I'll give you an example. Recently, there was a case where a woman was raped on a motorway, right? She was in the motorway, she got raped. And there was a few people involved in her rape. Now, from a utilitarian point of view, if you look at that thing, you have people maximizing their pleasure and one person who's going through pain. So if we look at maximization of pleasure and minimizing of pain, then from that perspective, that would be the morally right thing to do. Conversely, say right now, I'm sure you can touch and you can feel, but say if you were someone who felt no pain, right? You actually didn't have pain receptors, you have some sort of malfunctioning, then killing you would not be morally wrong in any way, because it would give me pleasure and you would not feel any sort of pain. So this utilitarian way of looking at things, one, it doesn't give you an objective standard, two, it gives you absurd results, and three, there's no way of adjudicating between two different scenarios with different moral variables.
Tell you what, I'm not exactly a utilitarian, because as you said, utilitarians put feeling good, pleasure as the pinnacle. I put having a future as a pinnacle. The existence of the species requires that people feel some pleasure, because if people exist in perpetual pain, it reduces their possibility of survival.
Right.
So I think pain receptors themselves, I think we can agree on that. Maybe not, because I would say it's a trait that was developed through evolution and epigenetics, because pain is useful for us to understand where we are getting destroyed and to prevent ourselves from being destroyed.
Sure.
The example you gave about multiple men raping a woman, yeah, indeed, the man will feel pleasure. The woman
would you agree from a utilitarian point of view, you can't disagree against the argument then?
I can, because you're ignoring all the other people of the equation. If we allow certain men to rape a woman, yes, the group of men is more than one woman, but the whole society will suffer an exponentially bigger threat because of that. It's going to remove the taboo of raping women. It's going to be the rule of the strong, not the rule of the clever, not the rule of the one who knows how to rule. It's going to be the rule of the ones who holds biggest strength.
Sure. So what you're saying is, if you, this is a classical defense, right? So what you're saying is, if you take that example and you apply it to society then overall you're going to have more pain than pleasure.
Event.
However, that's assuming that firstly other people find out about the rape, because they could just kill her and get rid of the body.
Yeah, they could.
Secondly, that's also assuming that there's more moral good than bad in society, because you could have a society where it's kind of like, and there are some societies in the world in which toxic type of behavior against women is more prevalent than others. So this is assuming all things being equal that you would have this outcome. But if we change the variables again, this scenario changes again and it gives us different outcomes. So what I'm trying to get to is this. If we look at the utilitarian point of view, or you're saying your view is slightly different because you're looking at
not exactly
the survival of the lineage of the group of populations rather than
the species,
you could say. Okay, the problem with that is, from a purely biological point of view, if man was red in tooth and claw and our lives were short and brutish, the Hobbesian viewpoint, how do you get from that? Because it's a wonderful idea that we care about species. It's a wonderful idea. But what I'm asking for is, under your worldview, how is it actually grounded? Because I would agree with you.
Very good.
Because let's just do this. Let's get rid of utilitarianism. Let's agree the survival of the species is best. But does that fit under a agnostic worldview?
Yes.
Okay.
It fits even, I would say, under an individualistic view, which is mine. I have a selfish view. I do what I do for my own benefit. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not doing it for, mumbo jumbo, nice, goody-two-shoes reasons. But there's an understanding that if you help society, society is gonna help you. If you make society prosperous, if you make society great, and if you make humanity great, it's going to be better for you, because humanity, it's an exchange of goods between different humans. I'm doing it for myself in the end, but doing it for myself doesn't negate the fact that it's in my interest to help the others. You know what I mean?
So
it's a simple understanding that I think it's very important for people to have.
That the world is utilitarian, not necessarily, regardless, you're saying it is utilitarian, rather than it's taken a conscious utilitarian.
I'm saying it's just logical.
There is that, and what you're basically describing is you're describing inclusive fitness. So essentially, all good can be broken down to kin selection, which is kin selection of reciprocal altruism. So you're good to someone because they're going to be good to you eventually, or you're good to someone because they carry your genes, right? And according to some theorists, this is where good comes from. The problem, however, there is that the idea that good only comes from this type of reductive bottom-up approach doesn't explain good actions that we do for which we are not reciprocated, and good actions that we do that don't benefit our inclusive fitness in terms of kin selection. So for example, when you help out somebody and you give charity, most of the time today, charity is anonymous. The person that you're giving money to, he could be a free rider. And free riders could take over society, and society would be destroyed, right? So again, we're in the same dilemma, because your worldview at the moment, at best, it's a great idea, survival of the species, but in terms of grounding it,
People don't think about it.
Sorry?
People don't think about it.
You're right, they don't think about it.
They don't think about it. Yeah.
They like the idea, they don't think about where it's grounded.
I would justify that with this, because at this point, it's not only a mental conclusion. At this point, it's a genetic trait. We spoke about this last time. You remember the example I gave about the cavemen and the wolves, blah, blah, blah. The cavemen who helped the others, they kept living because they helped each other. It doesn't need to happen in your head. The conclusion doesn't need to happen in your head.
The thing is,
it's something genetic. And let me just say one more thing. That's where psychopaths come into play. Because psychopathy is from birth. It's not earned. Sociopathy is earned with time from big stress through life. Psychopathy is something that comes from birth. And simply put, psychopathy is the deviation from this gene of altruism, of helping others. The deviation of it. Psychopaths, they sometimes are successful because I would say that psychopaths eventually develop this gene of deceit, of deceiving others for their own benefit, But mostly, I would say, psychopaths are not clever enough to hide their real agenda, their real desires, so they simply get removed by by evolution, by epigenetics. They simply can't coexist with humans because other humans see they won't get anything in return from helping them. So it's something genetic, basic genetics in people.
You see, that if you say it's purely genetic, that creates another line of problems.
This example that you gave, I'm just mentioning this example.
Sure, but look,
you're doing anonymous.
Okay, so let's extrapolate all the possibilities. So there's a genetic element, there's an epigenetic element in which the environment induces a gene switch. There is a behavioral element in terms of your behavior giving you adaptive advantages, and there's a symbolic or cultural element in terms of the culture, right? So that's evolution in four dimensions. Okay, the problem, however, is you're still back to the same issue, which is only under certain conditions will it give you the outcome that we're actually looking for, because there's many scenarios in which kin selection, reciprocal altruism, and even if you say a type of altruism is a byproduct of this, it still gives you a lot of limitation on human nature, which is why I take the view that the bottom-down reductive view of human nature does not fit what we actually see in the real world. And that's why I don't agree with Darwinism, because I don't think it can explain much of human behavior.
Well, again, so
society. You don't think it can explain society?
I don't think it can explain more than the aspects of society which fit into reciprocal relationships or things that help our inclusive fitness. I think those are the only aspects it explains, and it doesn't explain a large part of what we would call human nature.
But human nature itself is flawed. So the logic that humans have to exist is necessarily also in a way flawed. It's not what I'm saying.
What do you mean by flawed?
It's not foolproof.
What do you mean by human nature is flawed?
Well, simply put, humans don't know things with absolution, with absolute certainty. They have approximations, right? We have approximations that make us make valid conclusions, right?
Right.
As David Hume, he divides knowledge into three categories. You probably know about this, but let me just say it for the rest of the people. It's first of them is matters of fact. Relations of ideas, yeah. It's basically 1 + 1 = 2, a triangle has 3 sides, the denial of which leads to self-contradiction. The second one is matters of fact. For example, I'm standing right here near you. I'm standing right here with these guys. We can speak, we can see each other, we can touch each other. It's dependent on our senses, and thus it's flawed just like our senses. For example,
secondary properties.
Yes. If I am, for example, daltonic, then me seeing all of you around is not exactly the same way as you see the other people around. So senses, flawed. And the third one is observed regularities, and it's the most flawed of all because it's predictions for the future. And that's what we're doing here. We're talking about valid ways of humans organizing themselves in a society. I base myself not on the Quran, not on the Bible. I base myself on history. That's the most basic thing that I base my knowledge on. I see what has functioned through the course of history. I see how people, the problems that people have had, and the solutions they came up with, and the success or lack of. And I make a conclusion. This is better than this. For example, if a country is in big strife, it's getting attacked, it's getting wrecked by other countries, it needs something. Then in that case, a totalitarian government for that country might actually be useful for them to defend themselves, because that's how you get shit done quickly, right? That's how you get things done, immediately, because you need to react fast. But in times of peace, it's not that great, because as you know, absolute power corrupts absolute, and eventually the government becomes corrupt. You know what I mean? So two different ideologies. Usually we say, totalitarianism, it's evil. It's bad for times of peace, but for times where you're getting slaughtered, where you're getting killed, it's either kill or be killed.
Would you say you learning more history, or us learning more history, is going to give us those lessons that we need to make us better?
I'm very certain of that.
Okay, so the problem I have with that alone is you can't go from what is out there to what we should be doing. That would be the naturalistic fallacy. So this has happened. If this happened, then this happened, and historically, if, say for example, if Hitler did not invade Russia, Soviet Union, and instead he just concentrated on the Western Front, he probably would have won the war. So, knowing all these contingencies, we can't go from is to this is what we ought to do. So the problem I have with this perspective is no matter how much knowledge we gain, we will not know what to do. At best, we know what has happened.
I disagree. I think we will know the probability of what might work. You know, for example, Hitler started a war on two fronts, right? But at the same time, you know, the situation is very complex, especially Hitler, because he didn't have resources, he needed to act fast, he needed to do blitzkrieg to take over the world, basically. It was a losing situation from the very beginning. They were practically doomed. It's already strange how the Germans did so well at the war. Personally, I find it strange. But mostly it's because Stalin killed all the good generals in the Soviet Union, so they started getting slaughtered by the thousands. It's all because of Stalin, basically, that the war went so badly for the Soviet Union. But it was much more powerful than Germany, so they still won. You know? But what we can learn from this, for example, is that if you start a war on two fronts, there's a bigger likelihood that you'll lose the war. You know?
Yeah, but all you're going to do is you're going to help a 21st century warlord how not to make mistakes of the past.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Because look, if you are facing Hitler in a war, you need to know the same lessons that you can learn with Hitler. You know, you learn with everyone, even with your enemy. I would say especially with your enemy. Hitler made a mistake, and you learn with that mistake. So, for example, imagine
the mistake was losing, but it
the
says
mistake was opening two fronts.
Yeah, but that will give you nothing about the moral. The moral color of what he did that was wrong, and the way that you know, he persecuted the Jews. I mean, all those things are going to be.
But we're not talking about that. We're not talking about that.
So how can we speak about right or wrong, though?
Okay. Now we're talking just about war. Win-lose, right? We're omitting morality here because war. Let's face it, war has no morality.
Well, I don't agree with that.
It's blood, tears, and shit. There's no beauty in war. There's no
beauty in war, but there are morals. There are moral imperatives. There are rights. There are wrongs. There's laws of what do they call them? Just war theory.
These days, look, people basically have accepted certain rules, so they won't destroy themselves. It's a basic rule of self-preservation, right? There's no actual rule, but they will try to maintain those rules. So, because look, imagine this. Imagine you're fighting against an army and you have a big victory. You capture 1 million prisoners, 1 million soldiers, and you kill them all because you want to win the war. Next battle, you get 1 million soldiers captured and they get all killed, right? Or 2 million and they get all killed. It's a very destructive path. It's a very risky path, you know. So it's it's better to go, you know, the more lenient way.
Do you see
about morality, about killing the Jews, all of that stuff? I would say we can logically assert that it's not a good way to go either. Because, you know, for example, many of the German scientists were Jews. The Germans, you know, I have a personal theory that Hitler hated the Jews mainly because they were competition to him. They were competition to his ideology, to his, you know, how should I say, to his strive for power. You know, Hitler actually borrowed some money from the Jews, and he eventually turned on them, so he wouldn't give it back. He made the Jews the boogeyman.
If he took the advice from history, if he could see into the future, he'd just be a worse person because he'd use the Jews to conquer and he'd do different things.
There's one thing I think that Hitler, if he considered, he didn't pay too much attention to. I don't think he paid enough attention to this. It's that it's what we said before. You know, you do something to somebody else, you are ruthless to somebody else, they'll be ruthless back at you. It's exchange basically. Hitler had the idea of Aryan supremacy. He thought they could win against all odds. They couldn't. They lost. Hitler made a gamble based on a misplaced ideology, basically. He thought he was superior, but he wasn't. And he was ruthless because he thought he was superior. But now the main point of this whole situation is, if you kill people based on their ethnicity, it removes a very important taboo. Because it basically allows for witch hunts inside of your own ranks. You know, for the perfect example is the social justice warriors nowadays. You know the TERFs over there, the feminists who are against trans people. The perfect example of social justice warriors fighting social justice.
I didn't know. Are they down there?
They're left already. I think they've already left. But look, basically, they are judging people based on their ideology. If you disagree with us, you're a Nazi, you're evil, you're this, you're that, you're that. And they started the same witch hunts in their own ranks. It's a destructive ideology from the very beginning because it's very extremist in its very core. Same with religious extremism. You know, you become a religious extremist. Let's imagine this during the Spanish Inquisition. Sure, you will have a lot of power over the people, blah blah blah. But then eventually, if somebody has a little bit more power or influence, they can say he's a heretic, and that's it. You get burned at the stake. That's why I don't like mob rule. You know, mob justice. It's very volatile. It's very volatile. One day you're ruling the mob, the next day you're getting burned by the mob.
Yeah, but again, we're back to the.
I was going to just come back to.
It's just not functional. It's just not logical.
Just come back to what you were kind of your perhaps argument is it's gone into more a conscious group thing rather than actually a group consensus, an unspoken known group consensus that creates these things. So it's not necessarily intentionally created. Your argument might be that Islam is the structure that humans need in order to progress as a society, and perhaps.
Well, even before that, I would say anything from God.
Okay. But also because without Islam, you might fear or think or believe that society would descend in a moral way. However,
well, you can have a stable society without. But what I was actually speaking about is you can't have objective morals without God. That was my main point.
But you know, in practice, what does that mean? I mean, that's a bigger argument as well. But actually, even within Islam, society is descending. It's only the best when Muhammad was here, and it's a built-in descent by prophecy.
Yeah, I mean,
Even though
having dissent or not having dissent, that wasn't the main crux of the point. The point I was trying to get to is that from an agnostic point of view, if you try and look purely at history, you can't derive from there morals and imperatives for what we need to do in the 21st century. And without God...
The commandments are a natural law, they're not God-given.
Which is, sorry?
The commandments are a natural law, they're not God-given laws, they were society's natural law.
I mean, of course, that's what. I assume you're not religious person, right? You're not a religious person. I mean, of course, that's what you would say. He's going to say the opposite. It's just my words against yours. It's not.
Because it depends what perspective you come from. Because if you come from a perspective of, I'm not sure, are you agnostic or?
No, I'm non-dualist.
Sorry, non-dualist. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a new one.
Non-dualist. What does it mean? I believe.
Are you a monist then?
I believe everything is perfect right now.
Oh, I see.
What do you mean?
Do you believe in predetermined fate?
Predetermined fate, perfection.
I see. It's
every moment.
something like Calvinism. You know, Calvinists
It's
believe in
kind of
predetermined fate.
pantheism.
Or
I believe basically this universe is a intelligent or a spiritual energy. So it's an intelligent energy without a duality. So no good or evil.
Okay.
But is that really right? Does that sit right with a human being to accept the idea that giving charity and running over someone deliberately is the same thing? This is right and wrong is equal.
I mean, of course, as flawed beings, we need to establish values of good and evil, but it doesn't mean they're absolute. It just means they need to be good for us to have a future as a society.
No, but what he's saying, I think, is different.
Yeah,
it's ultimately, ultimately everything is.
There is cause and effect.
Yeah.
If you do bad things, X, Y, all the things that you're saying, all the things that you're saying. But from objectively, there is no good and evil or good or bad. It is all has to be as it is, and it's only our belief system that makes it wrong.
So your view starts with the idea that the universe is an intelligent, conscious place. Eternal. So what makes you think that the universe is intelligence and has will, I'm guessing, right?
Has a
volition.
Well, kind of, creation. It's a creator.
So why wouldn't you just go one level higher and say God is the creator of the universe?
I could say the other way around. Why make up a God when you've got this universe that does that?
Because when you have something which is intricately designed, like the universe, and you have this order and organization and complexity, then to attribute that to the entity itself wouldn't make any sense. You'd have to attribute it to the one who put it in place. It's like
You made something. I'm saying it's a self-creating spirit, energy, and the purpose for it is life, is consciousness being conscious of itself.
Okay, so before we get to purpose, before we get to purpose, like you yourself, you exist right now, but for you to come into existence, there was a myriad of actual conditions, the conditions of existence for you to come into existence. So there was external input. So why wouldn't you apply that to the system itself if it applies on the micro level?
Because why would I?
Because the logical thing to do is to use the same inference that you're using in everyday life and use that for bigger problems. And what was the second thing you said about purpose?
Purpose is I think the intention of the universe is to create generally, and is consciousness being conscious of itself. Life.
So self-awareness.
Well, life, everything that is involved in this life.
So, what would the purpose of life be? Because that would be a description of what's happening. But what is the actual purpose?
To live and create.
So, I mean, as an idea, essentially you've gone back to the self-gene idea, which is the ultimate rationale of life is survival and reproduction. It's a long way of doing the same thing.
I don't think there's very much difference between my kind of world universal view and your view of God, except that you give, in my mind, you give anthropomorphic qualities to something outside of this universe rather than actually non-anthropomorphic quality of life.
Right, so as Muslims, we don't believe in God being anything like a human being or anything we can imagine. So we don't have this anthropomorphic idea of a man in the sky on a chair.
No, I understand that, but
Yeah.
I would beg to differ, because I think your anthropomorphization comes from the qualities that you imbue to this. So mercy,
being benevolent,
wrath, emotion, benevolence, all of those things are anthropomorphization.
Okay, so let's look at this. Is it anthropomorphic to believe the universe exists? Because we exist.
Well, I guess it's what I would say, our existence is perception. So
We can't say, for example, if I say God exists and I exist, does that mean I'm being anthropomorphic? Not really, because my existence has a beginning, has an end, when God's existence has no beginning, no end. So for example...
You don't know that your existence has a beginning and an end.
Well, of course I do, because I came into life, and now I will pass away.
Make a contract with you before you came into life, and when you die, does your soul not live on?
I mean, the immortality of the soul, right?
I mean, we live on, but that doesn't mean we existed forever. There is a finitude, and if God wants, He can make us vanish after death, that there is nothing, but He decided for us to live on. So look, what it is going back to this idea of purpose, because for me that was a bit confusing. Are you saying the pure purpose of life is to live?
It's creation and life.
And coupled with your idea of monism, non-dualism, you would say everything's predetermined.
Yeah. So would you.
No, well, we would actually say, we would say free will and predetermination. We believe in both, right?
Yeah. I don't believe that those can be combined, but okay.
Yeah, we believe they can be. But from your perspective,
I don't believe in predetermination necessarily. I believe in not free will.
Okay, so would you believe in a type of genetic determinism?
Well, it's all of those genetic, social